Well, hello there, Internet. I am back to talk about Trump again because he has to keep getting in trouble and has to keep getting to go into all of these different legal issues, and then I have to talk about them because now we're looking at a racketeering charge, which is really, really complicated. So the reason that Georgia has decided to go after Trump using the RICO Act is because it allows them to pull in all of these different acts that were committed in different jurisdictions. Because for RICO, as long as you have at least one of the offenses occurring in the jurisdiction where this individual is charged, then you're able to pull in things from other areas so you can establish a pattern of these, corrupt actions. So it allows the case to be opened up quite a lot. The funny thing about all of this is that Giuliani, who is one of the co-defendants for this Georgia RICO case, has literally gone after a bunch of crooks when he was a lawyer using RICO, and he kind of popularized it. So it's super ironic that now he's getting hit with, RICO issues. So RICO is really, really complicated because it requires certain predicate offenses, meaning in order to establish a RICO charge, you have to have other offenses that you can put together to establish this pattern of corruption. Hey there, Paper Dragonfly. I'm trying to be better about watching this, but Lord knows, so many things to distract me. But so the predicate offenses are essential for a RICO charge, because the reason that RICO charges were even invented is because they were initially trying to go after these, these gangsters who were the head of these organizations. But they also were really hard to get because they had all their underlings do their dirty work. So the legal, structures said, we got to come up with a way. Oh, this is a really good point. Political speech isn't a crime. I definitely want to come back to that. So we will come back to that. I promise. Very good thing to bring up. So basically it was established because they had to have a way to charge these people who weren't doing the offenses themselves always, but they were directing them. And so that's why you have to have these predicate offenses, and the actual racketeering charge is about soliciting other people to break the law in specific ways. And you have to have, at least two of them, and it has to be in the, trying to get a certain result. So basically, as long as, it's some sort of enterprise, which is very, very loose and has been used against, political campaigns before, it is very easily established that a political campaign could be considered an enterprise under RICO. So pretty much the only thing you have to prove is the racketeering activity, and I will go through some of those. But I do want to come back to the concept that free speech is not a crime. So that's one of the things that differentiates the Georgia case from the DC case. Because in DC, they really avoided charging Trump with any sort of, speech issues. They completely skirted the First Amendment issues. They did a really good job at focusing it around the fake electors. Focusing it around the fake electors and, those documents and things that were actual actions. But this Georgia case, there are elements to it that they're bringing in under this big old RICO umbrella that could be challenged under free speech grounds. And there are other aspects of this Georgia case that could be removed and put into a federal court. It does not cover everything that's being charged. It would be very hard. Well, actually, it'd be impossible to argue that every single part of this is a free speech issue. I actually had to make notes because there's so many different charges. So I will go through some of those in a second. But I did just want to point that out, that is a really good thing to be aware of. So also, because I have a tendency to make everyone mad, if you want to go live, and because I need a new tripod, if you send me one of those fun little trumpet things, then I'll accept your invite and you can say whatever you want. All right, when are they going to go after the corrupt judge? There's several judges involved. The one in in Georgia. I don't know which corruption you're talking about specifically. If you share, then I will discuss that. But it will go federal. We all know the scheme. There's parts of it that could be, pulled into federal court. That's definitely true. But for the most part, there are certain aspects that definitely took place in Georgia. Like the fact that the Raffensperger calls were specifically with, a Georgia representative. They were recorded. You very specifically have somebody being told that they should call a session, that they should find a specific number of votes is, definitely trying to prod somebody in the direction of some sort of action. And their argument is that the action would have been against his oath of office, which would be an action taken to try and change the results of an election. So basically, that's what they have to prove, is that that not only was this like pressure put on to this guy, but that it was also trying to get him to do something that's against his oath of office, which you totally could do. Because you could argue that certain actions that were taken are within the normal political, actions. So that's going to be Trump's argument, is that, oh, well, I'm saying that these things were illegitimate and it's within his purview to be able to challenge the particular votes. The thing is, the actual statements that Trump made during the call were not correct, which allows them to also apply RICO, because one of the predicate offenses for RICO is if you go ahead and you say that you are willing to be dishonest to try and get someone to do something. So that's one of the aspects of it. Someone saying take it from a Democrat. I don't really identify as a Democrat. The shit you people believe, I'm not sure. If you can give me a very specific thing, I'll delve into it more, because there's a lot of different aspects of it and there's a lot of different things that can be addressed. So if we just talk about first, what exactly he's accused of, then we can go from there. So Trump has 13 charges within the, I think it's 41 that him and the co-conspirators are charged. What does you people mean? I don't know what that means either. Get specific with me. I promise I will try and address whatever you want to say. So he is charged with soliciting people to break their oath of office and for directing people to try and solicit others to break their oath of office. For example, let me actually pull this up really quick. So Eastman, he went ahead and he filed this legal suit during New Year's that had a bunch of dishonest things in it. And then Trump signed something that was attached to it saying that that information was true. So that's a false document and false statements. We also had Sidney Powell. She coordinated the break-in to look at the Dominion voting machines. And then also they went ahead and they published the voter data to the other people that were involved. So that's another, issue that was directed by somebody that was associated. That's why RICO charges are so messy and they're really, really hard to prove. So it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be very, very complicated, but there are a lot of, paper trails to follow, which makes it challenging for Trump to fight because, you have Cheese Bro. What a name, right? It sounds fake. I feel like I'm in that Idiocracy movie whenever I hear Cheese Bro. That's such a weird name. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. I don't know. But anyways, he sent an email that was to the Trump campaign with documents for these fake electors to sign saying that they were the legitimately elected electors. And so that right there is a document that Trump did go ahead and present to the U.S. archivist in Georgia. So that makes him directly involved with documents that were incorrect, that were not right. Baby food on my face. Lord knows what could be on my face, honestly. So then you also have, different people who are representing the campaign who tried to pull together like the Georgia Senate to say that they needed to go ahead and appoint different electors, which would be against their oath of office because it's trying to influence an election. So a lot of RICO is conspiracy stuff and trying to influence other people to do things. That's what makes it different. And that's why it was used against like mob bosses, because very often they didn't get their own hands dirty. Trump is highly respected by world leaders. I'm not really sure how you mean that to be taken, because some people would say that's joking, and some people would say that you actually mean that. So I don't know how to take that. So I do know that Saudi Arabia just gave, Kushner a couple $2 billion. So apparently they like him, but, they're kind of concerning. Why wait 3 years to indict? That is a really good point. And I think it's different for each of the indictments. So for the Georgia case, for the RICO case, it is so freaking complicated. I'm not surprised by how long that one has taken, because Lord knows I have spent so much time digging through it, and there are just so many different moving parts that you kind of have to put together to even be able to see what they're building on like a macro scale. And that's just the nature of RICO cases. So that does make sense that it took so long. When it comes to the documents case, I feel like that should have been brought pretty quickly, but we also look at how, we had Judge Cannon step in and say that the state wasn't allowed to look at the documents until after they had, someone go through and make sure that it was okay for the state to look at it and take out privileged information and stuff. So that was, she was trying to slow it down. So I think that when you look at the fact that there were people who were trying to slow it down, that could impact how long it takes to bring the charges. But I do wish that had come a little quicker. I know that, there's the saying that if you take a shot at a king, you better not miss. So maybe people are very concerned that if they don't come with a really airtight case, that it would be a really bad idea. And I do think it's fair to try and gather as much evidence as possible. But I also understand why people are kind of weirded out by it taking so long. I totally get that. I'm not surprised by it with RICO, but with the documents, I'm on the fence about that one, because they also did tell him, hey, turn these in. Here's another opportunity. We're missing them. They gave him a long time to go ahead and just send the documents back in. So that also took up time because they were expecting him to just send them back in. Okay. They're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. That is kind of the nature of RICO charges, that they do kind of throw everything at the wall, which makes it very likely that certain aspects of it will fall off. For a RICO charge, you only need 2 predicate offenses, and they've got a massive list of them. So even if quite a few fell off, it's very likely that, they would still be able to come up with RICO charges. And RICO charges are very interesting because you can't pardon them if you're the president. The governor can't even pardon for state charges in Georgia. And the only pardons you can get are from the parole board, and you have to have already served your sentence. So RICO has a mandatory minimum of 5 years, but they can be probation. So it's still very, judge's discretion. That's always the name of the game. Trump is respected by authoritarian regimes. I mean, we definitely know that there are several that feel that way about Trump. Can't wait for the movie to be over. I don't know what that means. Trump bold. Okay. Look, I understand why people got excited about Trump, because we have this political establishment that has failed us repeatedly. It's really, really hard to be working class these days. Our economy is not working for us. There are a bunch of elite people who are screwing over us on the bottom. And Trump comes in and he goes, y'all are completely, illegitimate. You're liars. You're corrupt. You take money because I gave you the money. That is something that's so refreshing. And then he was like, well, I'm going to fight for the working class, and he said a lot of things that would have been really good. Unfortunately, most of the good things that he promised didn't materialize. And I think that that's for a bunch of different reasons. You know, that most things that politicians promise don't materialize. So I'm definitely not saying that that is unusual, but they are kind of coming at Trump. That I think is fair, because someone messaged me and they asked if I felt like Trump was being targeted. And I see where that's coming from. In a way, yes, the political establishment has turned against him. I think the reason that they have turned against him is because they love the status quo, which is not working for us. And the type of things that he did are just so far away from what they are guilty of. You notice he's really not, nobody's really caring about his financial dealings. Nobody's really like coming after him for the illegitimate things like taking money from, you know, a foreign government when he's like the front runner. That's weird, you know, and things like that. That's something they're like, oh, whatever, we all do it. But when it comes to this election stuff and putting his thumb on the scale for that, because he did it in a way that other politicians don't feel like they're going to get, you know, in trouble for, they're willing to go after him for that. And, you know, it is very harmful for our country if we don't feel like we can have legitimate elections. And it is, when you actually read these indictments, it's very different than listening to people talk about it on television, because like right after the DC one dropped, everybody's talking about free speech, and turns out they specifically say he can say anything that he wants. Liberalism is a mental health crisis. I just don't really like naming things like that. So I kind of, it depends on how you look at liberalism. I think that freedom is very, very, very important. So when some people say liberalism, they're looking at it from a freedom lens. And when other people say it, they're looking at it like censorship and trying to protect the status quo and things that aren't as good, more on the neoliberal side. So that's why I think labels are not super helpful when we're talking about specifics. I am not a law student, but I'm just a weirdo who spends a lot of time reading about the law. There are a lot of really great lawyers that you can get the breakdown for, like the individual counts and everything. I have some written down. We'll see if I get to everything. Biden does not stand with Israel. Dude, there's not a politician right now that isn't standing with Israel. That's like kind of the third rail of politics these days. Is it okay to steal Palestinian land? No, it is not. And it's amazing because you have, you know, all these politicians who are like feeling like if they don't support Israel, they're going to be called anti-Semitic, when Israel is doing really messed up things against Palestinians, you know? And we're like, oh, well, we have to make sure that we're helping to pay for their Iron Dome, you know, but we can't question that. We cannot question the aid that we're giving to Israel without asking them to, you know, be nice to the Palestinians. Like, no strings attached. It's just one of those third rail politics. So I would not say that Biden does not stand with Israel, because he's a politician. All of them do right now. You sound very smart. Oh, that's sweet. I just spend a lot of time on this, honestly. I enjoy it. And for a really long time, it was like my little secret. I'd go home and I'd learn about political stuff. And then I started predicting things and I was like, man, am I going to have to talk about it? And now I'm having fun, you know, because I recognize that we all listen to different political people, and I've listened to a lot of people that have steered me wrong in the past. And so if, you know, someone is challenging your perspective, that can be really scary, and you can kind of lash out because you feel like your identity is being challenged. So at this point in time, it's, you know, it's fun. And if we can talk to people that are mad at us for our opinions, then I feel like it's a good way to help the country, theoretically. But Trump defense team can subpoena and uncover shady stuff in Georgia. Look, dude, if shady stuff is uncovered in Georgia, I will be the first person to say, yeah, that's bad. Like, recently, they found out that Biden's son, Hunter Biden, decided to go ahead and sell, or I guess he did have an intermediary, but in the end, one of his, like, little art projects was bought by, you know, a political, like, activist essentially who like donates to political campaigns, who then got a job like in the administration. So that is not good. It looks very bad. And if that job happened after the payment for the artwork, really bad. So I will be the first to admit that, you know, if there's something illegitimate, then I want to talk about it, because I think there's too many people that are more concerned about their side than like what the facts are, which is my goal, is to say as many things factually as possible and then to share when I'm wrong, which will happen. Unbelievable. Joe been selling influence for decades. You know, the email where Hunter claims that he's sitting next to the big guy because he's trying to get money. I thought that wasn't really legitimate because, you know, maybe the guy was sitting there, but you have a drug addict who wants money. And of course he's going to say that his dad is there and wants it to happen. So, you know, some of them, there might be there, and some that I feel like there's less there. What about white people? Are you racist? I'm very confused by that comment. I'm a redhead. I do not qualify as human. How do they filter information to the ones they want to? TV. You know, right now, most of the things that are on television are corporations that their number one concern is to make money. And we're talking about whatever their political bent is. Because think about when we saw those text messages where Tucker Carlson was saying, oh my God, our stock price is dropping, when people were abandoning Fox News over all of this election stuff. And this is not something that is only Fox. You know, if they're on television, there's a lot of money going through there. I mean, have you ever noticed how many pharmaceutical, you know, advertisements are there? Do you really think that they're advertising because they think that you are going to get on the phone and say, hey, I saw this commercial for Latuda. I don't even know what it's for, but I want it. You know what I mean? Like, more likely than not, these advertisers have all this money that's going to, you know, the studio. And so when it comes time to say, well, yeah, this particular pharmaceutical company kind of caused the opioid crisis, maybe they're going to have some kid gloves there. Maybe they're going to hold off. You know, there are ways to influence large corporations, just through like buying advertisements. Okay. So Biden administration is absolutely absurd. They all need help, including some Republicans. Politicians need help in general. But, you know, I have a lot of hope because we're paying attention now. You know, though, something Biden just did that I was actually really, really pleased about and surprised was he actually made it so that unions can be stronger, because now if a company does some really messed up union busting, then you can actually go complain, and then the union is automatically recognized if you can show majority support, and you don't even have to have the election. So it basically can end some of these like union busting activities that have become very common, that we've seen with, you know, Starbucks and with Amazon, you know, the firing of organizers, like all sorts of things that are trying to put a thumb on the scale against unionization. Because, you know, when we look back to like, you know, the 60s and 70s, and we see that unions were stronger and wages were better, and, you know, quality life for some, not all people, you know, tended to be better. Unions are really helpful. So the fact that, you know, the Biden administration did that, I'm super happy about. Also the taking, you know, marijuana off of a Schedule 1. That was pretty cool, pretty based. Of course, he can't do anything fully properly. He has to just, you know, make sure that it comes off of Schedule 1. Let's, you know, baby tiptoe around the subject and not quite do the right thing. But, you know, baby steps in the direction. That's kind of a political, you know, fad. To be honest, Biden isn't the actual president. It's Obama secretly leading the pack. Dude, Obama's off surfing in the Caribbean or wherever you see the pictures from, and going on podcasts. I don't even think Obama necessarily wants Biden to do that well, because he doesn't want Biden to look better than him. But that's just my like stupid conspiracy theory. I don't know. I made that up. Either you can't think for yourself, or you want to portray a narrative that fits your twisted point. If you can demo it to me, then I will let you know if I'm wrong. Okay, you realize both Republicans and Democrats hate all of us. That's a really good point, but I do want to separate voters from politicians because I feel like that voters very often, maybe they've listened to somebody different, maybe somebody has steered them in a direction that isn't as accurate, or maybe someone that they listened to got things wrong and was trying to share accurate information. But a lot of times I think the voters are coming from a good place, and then you give people tons and tons of money and they go to Washington, and it's like most people say if you gave them $1 million, they do stupid things, maybe not like truly evil things, but, make a fool of themselves. But it's like we think that politicians are not going to be influenced by millions of dollars. So I do think that there is a general abandonment of working class issues that happens to a lot of politicians. I'm not going to say all, but a lot of them once they get to Washington, and then that becomes a very bipartisan thing. Okay, so I'm going back to see made more money. Yeah, Picasso, I don't think Picasso made a bunch of money during his lifetime. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know anything about art history. That's talking about the Hunter Biden thing. I'm just seeing if I've missed over anything major. What would you read that is truth? That's a really good point and a really difficult thing to establish. And my best way of doing that is to try and prove myself wrong, because then I at least don't fall victim to identifying so much with my positions that if I'm presented with new information that I feel like I can't fully give it a shot. And it is probably going to require, looking in different places. It's difficult to assess how truthful something is because, like, during the pandemic, I read this scientific article on basically how the lab leak would be impossible. A little while later, we find out that, it's solidly likely. And so it's like, if you can't trust any particular thing all the time, it's challenging. And I think that being willing to challenge your own assertions is probably one of the best ways to try and find that. And being willing to recognize that you yourself are fallible and that you're gonna have blind spots. So be looking for that, All right. Do I think Trump will go to prison? That is complicated. Maybe. Because there is the mandatory minimum for the RICO charges. Now, that could be probation, but it doesn't seem like this particular judge is super concerned with getting him off on something light, and judge discretion changes everything. Like, for example, the documents case, they have a lot of proof for that, and I don't think anything will come of it because they have Judge Cannon, who has already, had rulings overturned that were so skewed in Trump's favor that other judges went back and overturned them. And judges do not like to overturn rulings because they kind of want to feel untouchable as a group. But then you go to the DC indictments and, she has been handing down pretty intense sentences in this general, area. So it definitely seems possible. And originally I was thinking because he has Secret Service, they're not going to be able to put him in prison, but you could actually have like one sitting in an admin building. He would go to a cushy place. It'd probably be kind of, nice, like better than most of the summer camps we could go to, but that is possible. It is definitely possible. It's also possible that he gets house arrest or probation. My concern, if he's charged, but he doesn't have like house arrest at least or prison time, I think that people are going to go with the narrative that he's completely innocent. And that's why he didn't get house arrest or prison time. So I think that could be a little dangerous, even if he is found guilty, which there's a paper trail. So whoopsies. I did not mean to, I'm still learning how to work this darn thing. The DC charges will go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court might not pick it up. It's totally possible. Because they didn't pick up the election stuff. He did like 60, it was either 59 or 60 court cases, and then the Supreme Court didn't pick that up. So it's not necessarily going to be picked up by them, especially because the DC indictment avoids any sort of free speech issues. It does not focus on any speech that he made at all, despite what people are saying. It has nothing to do with free speech. But the Georgia case does have some aspects of free speech that could be called into question. So if Trump serves a second behind bars, this nation must burn. I mean, I guess that's your opinion, but like, wouldn't you rather live in a place where there was more accountability for politicians? Like, maybe if Trump gets in trouble for something that he is found guilty for, then maybe we can get other politicians in trouble for things that they're guilty for. Maybe we can actually try and root out corruption. I think that's better than saying that if someone's a politician, they can't be charged. Trump will never get a fair trial. There's problems with our courts, but I really would encourage you to look at the indictments. I know it's a lot to read through. Here, I wrote down some options so that you can have some cliff notes. So Trump is accused of 13, and this is in the Georgia one because that's more complicated. The others are a little more straightforward. But in the Georgia's particular RICO thing, the 13 predicate acts that he was, potentially guilty of, let's say, they're looking at him for, are solicitation of a public official to violate an oath of office. So that is basically asking political officers to appoint electors that were not the ones that were decided upon by the people casting their votes. So he had his campaign go to the Georgia Senate and go to different, officers and say, hey, let's appoint, different people than the ones that the people in your area voted for, which would be going against their oath of office. So that is, and because like part of that is on the Raffensperger call, that is somewhat easy to establish, especially because some of the people actually went to the Georgia Senate and, asked it out in the open. So the actual action occurred. What he's going to argue is that they were allowed to appoint electors, and so that was within their purview of duties, and that it doesn't matter who the voters voted for because they actually appoint the electors. So that's going to be the contention there. They're also charging him with soliciting someone to impersonate some sort of public official. Once again, this is around the fake electors. So he actually delivered documents saying that the electors were the accurate ones. And, these actual documents were given to the government that were, false, and that these electors claimed on the documents that they were the ones that we voted for. Because that's how our system works. Basically, we don't vote for the president, which is dumb. We should get rid of this stupid stuff. But we don't vote for the president. We think we are, but we're voting for the elector in our electors in our states who then go and actually vote for the president. It's a really stupid system that is completely worthless. Maybe once upon a time when we didn't have technology, it made sense, but not anymore. So Trump is also being charged with conspiracy to commit forgery, also around these electors' documents. And so the counts 13 and 19 are about the fake elector, like certificates, the documents. And then 29 and 39 are around the Raffensperger call. And then 28 is about Meadows. And he was trying to also get them to go against their like oath of office or whatever. So that's like his specific stuff. But there's like 41 of them involving like these 18 different people. But yes, there are a lot of issues with that. I agree about the electors dumb. I know the thing is, we do need to overhaul our election system. There's a lot of things that made sense back when it took all day, to travel by like horse and buggy. Like maybe it made sense for an area to vote for a person who would then go and cast the vote for that area. But we don't need that anymore. That's just a leftover fragment of a political system that's not necessary. And so now we see all of this ridiculousness coming up because we don't directly vote. We vote for an elector who votes. So that allows anybody to try and influence these electors, and then there are different electors for each, candidate. So you're literally voting for a human who then votes for the candidate that you thought you were voting for. And then the human that has been promised to vote for the candidate that you thought you were voting for is then allowed to go in some states and vote for the opposite party just out of nowhere because they were in a bad mood that day. So, electors are dumb. So I keep almost accidentally blocking people. Okay, Trump blows your mind next month. All the left and half the right falls in this time. If I would love more than anything for Trump to go to court and make the argument that the election was stolen. I would love, he already has, but in this trial, I would absolutely love to see it. And I would be more than willing to look at any evidence that he has. Giuliani himself, who was representing him, went, and you could hear a recording where he's saying that he's not even bringing a fraud case. And a lot of the individual cases that they brought, because you get in trouble for lying in court, weren't even challenging enough votes to change the outcome of the election, even if they did win, which they lost most of them. But even if he had managed to overturn a state or two, he still wouldn't have won. So, it's just... I'd love to see this evidence. And, he promised that we would have evidence not that long ago, and then it didn't come out. That's the story. Can you physically prove that human exists? What is a human? Do I believe that Hunter Biden will get the mandatory 10 years for lying on? Okay, so that's a great thing to bring up, Larry. So with the firearms thing, there have actually been, it's gone to court where people have, had issues with lying about, getting guns. And those have actually been decided in their favor because we are a country that supports the Second Amendment, or our interpretation of the Second Amendment, very heavily. And so this has happened where people have said they don't use illegal drugs, and then they smoke weed, and then it goes to court, and the court's like, y'all are crazy. This person can own a gun. So if we look at other cases, it's generally in the defendant's, favor. So that particular charge would not be the way to get him. There are ways, I think, to go after him, but that particular one is not the most useful way to go after him. Because even if you wanted him to get in trouble, I doubt that you would want us to set the precedent where if you ever had any sort of intoxicants that you used regularly, that you could not only not buy a gun, but then you'd go to prison. I imagine that that's probably not what you're going for. So that particular charge, it's not surprising. It's usually dismissed or has some very basic, probationary stuff to go through to get it dismissed. That is a very unusual charge for anybody to go down, let alone do years in prison. It's very, very unlikely, even if you had no money and no power. Trump was a Democrat all his life. That's true. And he was it seemed like he was homies with, Hillary Clinton. And it seemed like that she thought that if she got somebody who wasn't in the political establishment to run against her, then she had a better chance of winning. And it seems like that he realized, hey, this would actually be pretty cool, and decided to go all in for it. And she's like, oh my God, what have I done? I don't have proof of that other than their apparent friendship beforehand. How long do you think it'll take Donald to save the world? There were a couple things that Trump wanted to do that would have been good if he had done them. He wanted to pull out of some wars. He wanted to give people some more money during the pandemic. There were a couple things that would have been solid, but I think what happened was he came out with these ideas. He even came out with the idea, nobody that people take seriously is actually trying to ban guns in America. There's one or two politicians that have said things that are more in that direction, but the vast majority of people with actual power are not in that lane at all. But like most rights, it is reasonable, and I know this is going to piss people off, but it is reasonable to have some regulations, a well-regulated militia. We're not even asking people to be in a militia, some regulations are reasonable. And Trump came forward and he wanted to have some regulations on gun ownership. We should close the gun show loophole so that people actually do have to get a background check to have a gun. That's a very reasonable thing, I think. I think that the way that we treat cars would be a great way to treat guns, to recognize that, there are a lot of people that want cars and that would enjoy having cars, but also that they can be dangerous. So to have a car, you have to have a license. You have to have insurance if you kill somebody. There's a couple things you have to go through that are reasonable, that are not that hard to go through. And Trump actually wanted to have some reasonable restrictions on buying guns, and pretty quickly that got shot down, I think, by the advisors around him. I'm not sure why he stepped off of some of these policies, but he had some good ideas. It just very often seemed like he was talked off the ledge of the good ideas. Okay. Can't get voter IDs. That's a good point. And the reason why people fight against voter IDs is because you do a lot of time if you have some sort of illegitimate, voting practice. If you go and you try to vote multiple times, you can do serious prison time. And it would be really, really, really practically impossible to do enough voter fraud to affect the outcome of the election. It'd be damn near impossible, and definitely impossible without getting caught. So it's like you'd have to be a complete idiot, which some people are, to go and risk prison time to get an extra couple votes that aren't going to impact the result of the election. And so the reason people don't want to institute IDs is because you have to pay for them. You have to drive to get them. Now, I think if you had, voter IDs that were free for people, then asking people to bring them would be more reasonable. You do have people register, and so you provide a lot of that information and where you're living. And it is relatively easy to track people down who do sketchy things and try to double vote. We see people getting arrested for this, but it's like the payoff, the risk versus reward of deciding to try and double vote is just massive. And it's not as common as some people want you to think. One last had 83,000 votes. If you give me the details, I will look into it. I'm worried about GOP backed voter fraud. There has been voter fraud that has been found in both parties. But just not enough to sway the results of elections. So we're focusing on the wrong things, I feel like. This whole concept of having electors could be a much better way to make our elections safer, because then you don't have the whims of random people influencing your vote. But you can't get anything without an ID. I mean, you can't get cigarettes and alcohol, but those are not rights. You know what I mean? And I get that that's a bad argument. I'm going to take that argument back, because there are rights that you need IDs for, or that I would argue to have IDs for. I think really the main thing is that the risk that would be averted by having an ID is just so low. Basically, the amount of information that you have to give them just to register to vote, they know who you are. They know who you are, and it's the registration process is similar and sometimes even longer than giving your actual. In fact, I had to have an ID when I registered to vote. So I think that it's just not something that's as concerning as people are making it out to be. I think it is a distraction. And I think that now if you accepted multiple different types of IDs and had a place for free IDs, I'd jump on board with you, not because I think it's essential, but because it's why fight against it? Free IDs could help people. But because IDs are expensive. Sometimes it's hard to, have to go to the DMV during working hours. It's complicated. And there are better ways to verify identity. They know when you register. Doesn't mean they know when you vote. Sure. But if somebody came up and, they said, I'm ready to vote, and that registration had already been used to vote, then they know something's up, and they can immediately, figure out who the right person is and correct it. And they do. I'm disabled and I had to go there. I found a way. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying that the amount of work for individuals is not there. The danger has been really exaggerated. And I know that's really hard to hear because a lot of people are exaggerating that danger, maybe because they actually believe it, maybe because they're trying to distract. So I get that that's kind of a hard statement to hear. But it is something that is not really where the danger from, our elections being messed with is coming from. All right. I see people like, even though there's not even that many people watching right now, but I'm loving that y'all are talking. So it's super cool. I'm doing this late at night. But because I have a lot of people trying to go live with me through this, I have this thing where you can send me a trumpet and I will go live and you can insult me all you want. So replacing an ID is a total pain in the ass. Yeah, it is. And I know it sounds crazy because someone else said that you needed an ID for a bank account. That's true. You would be shocked how many people don't even have bank accounts. Like, there are people who have very different experiences in this country than y'all do. And that is something that we have to weigh when we're looking at these things. And the magnitude of voter fraud to influence the election is just spectacular. And the amount of people that are, even trying to have some sort of different way, honestly, because when I registered, I needed an ID. I'm not even sure why this is like something that people are so hung up on. But all that aside, I do think that it is something that we have to weigh the difficulty against the actual harm that it could be preventing. And I have yet to see anyone show me that could change the results of an election at all. Most of it to cover for the machines. I'm not sure what that means. You look like a Democrat. I didn't know Democrats look like something. I don't identify as a Democrat, but where's the danger coming from? So yeah, one of the dangers would be the issue with electors. It's so crazy to me that you have somebody who's promised to vote for a candidate. People go in and say you vote Trump, right? So you vote for Trump and you think that that's who you're voting for. You're not voting for him at all. You're voting for an elector who said he was going to vote for Trump. But say this elector has a fight with his wife and he's like, you know what? You wanted Trump, so I'm going to vote Biden. They can do that in a lot of states, which is wild. And then sometimes they're not allowed to be an elector again, or sometimes there is some sort of like consequence. But in other, states, you're allowed to do that. It's being a faithless elector. So it's like we're not even electing the candidate that we think we're going to elect. So there are ways to impact the election process, some of which we're seeing play out in these indictments to bring it back around. Yes, Bob. In some areas, they do get fined and removed as an elector, but this is not across the board. Different states have different laws for how to deal with faithless electors, and in some, you don't even get fined. No, she can't be a Democrat. I don't see any hate and anger from her. I think it's totally possible to have hate and anger from anybody, and I can get riled up sometimes, but I've found that most of the individuals who are living in this country, they're coming at it either from a good faith perspective, or they have heard something that might be incorrect, but it really justifies their perspective. And so I think it's worthwhile to just try and have the conversation and recognize that we're all going to be wrong sometimes, and that it's cool to have that, conversation that might be a little challenging sometimes. You can't be a Christian and vote Democrat. Now that I would disagree with. So I think there's an issue with deciding that a certain belief system needs to align with a certain political party, because it's easier to look at it in like Middle Eastern countries, you know, because we're not so attached to it. So if you look at Sharia law, that is where they developed law to go along with their religion. And it basically allows you to establish laws that aren't coming from a perspective of trying to maximize people's happiness and well-being, but is instead saying that if it's in the religion, then it's, you know, that's all the justification we need for it. And it allows people to get a little more extreme because people's, you know, religions matter to them. So I think that's something that, you know, that we want to be careful not to align too heavily a belief system with a voting mechanism. And I know where that's coming from, because I know that for a lot of people who are in the Christian faith, I was a preacher's kid, so like I know this well. So for a lot of people, they see abortion as being something that is committing murder. And of course, now we're looking at what these anti-abortion laws are doing, and people are actually dying. And oftentimes when, you know, it wouldn't save the potential life by not, you know, doctors are scared to do anything even when the baby is like dead, because they don't want to be charged, you know. So there's a lot of complication around the way these laws are getting set up. And, you know, when we had Roe versus Wade, that said that you were not allowed to do, you know, that individual states could decide about like late term abortions, but like very, very, very early on, then, you know, it was something that you were allowed to do. And what we can actually look at is that abortion rates they stay pretty stable, whether it's legal or not, because people will travel for it. And then we have like back alley abortions. So a lot of times these laws that are being passed actually lead to more death and not less death. But I think if you align that so heavily with the concept of pro-life, then you're like, well, as somebody who is religious, then I want to support life. And I think the concept of supporting life is a great thing to want. I just think it's important to look at how these laws play out in the real world, instead of looking at it by like conceptually, is it icky? Does it feel weird? Like, you know, it's very possible to not want abortions to happen and to not want to decide that for yourself or your family, and also recognize that by having the state enforce anti-abortion laws, it makes it so that if you have like a ectopic pregnancy where you could be like literally hemorrhaging, then doctors might feel uncomfortable to treat you, or there's just a lot of other aspects involved that are important to take into account. So I know that was a whole lot, but there we are. Okay. Each person is responsible for their choices. Yeah. And I think that having, you know, some things can be decided by the individual and don't have to be legislated. Okay. Blew up Nashville. I don't even know what that means. Did something happen in Nashville? It's totally possible. I can't keep up with everything. The baby murder industry keeps the Gates family rich. I mean, Bill Gates is a nightmare. Like, no, most people aren't going to argue with that. But okay, so actually, I could make an argument that Bill Gates did contribute to children dying. So stay tuned for that one. So what he's not doing is killing babies and sucking their blood. That's not what I'm saying. But what he did do is he is so concerned about his patent rights, his own money, that there was a period of time where we could have waived our patent protections for the vaccine in like India. And I know that a lot of people, you know, don't feel comfortable taking that, and I'm fine with that. But for the people that wanted it in India, it would have helped at least decrease some of the transmission. I know you can get it with the vaccine. I'm very aware of that. But you have a lower rate of transmission, and when you do get it, the symptoms are not as intense. At this point, I don't blame people who are not getting it for us having it around, because especially with newer variants, it's not cutting down on transmission much, but it is dealing with death. And so these countries really, really wanted it for the people who wanted it. And he went and he basically got involved and tried to block this temporarily waiver of patent protections. And he was very influential in that fight. And so these entire countries that really, really wanted to be able to have and use the vaccine were unable to do it because he wanted to protect his precious patent rights. So there were people who would have wanted the vaccine who got much more severe illnesses and died because Bill Gates decided to be selfish. So there we go. The ejection infection may be a killer this time. I don't know what that means. Democrats are destroying America on purpose. I feel like that a lot of our politicians are passing different things that are destructive. And I think that they're doing it because we have so much money in politics. So if we were able to get money out of politics, then they would actually be able to vote in ways that reflected their actual beliefs and that reflected the beliefs of their constituents. And I think this is something we can probably agree on. So I think that if we can get a constitutional amendment to be able to ban this like unlimited corporate money that's going into elections, then we would not have politicians voting for things that actively make the country worse, which is something that does happen. What state am I in? I've moved around a lot, but I grew up in the South, which I think has given me a relatively broader understanding of different political perspectives, because I grew up in the South and then I went and lived in, Wisconsin for a little bit. And then, I've lived in areas that tend more towards the blue or red side of the spectrum, which is something that I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like how we kind of pick our team. And then as long as someone's on our team, we will fight and say that they were right even when they're wrong. And I feel like that kind of widens the gap and makes it harder for us to look at things from a reasonable and measured perspective. I think it's really, really hard when you feel like you're identifying with your group when you have a certain perspective. And if you go away from that perspective, then you're losing a community, like that can be harmful for trying to actually look at the way that things are. Mr. Trump could manage a McDonald's? Gosh, I am so confused. We're going to shut the government, period. Oh, actually, that is one of the things that ultimately would be amazing. If we could, down the road, super complicated, there's a lot of things involved, but a general strike is something that could be powerful, that I really, really hope that someday we can get enough people together and organize enough to be able to demand certain things that would be good for our country. And a general strike is a good way to do it. There's certain things that would have to be worked out. You don't want people to be like dying, in like a hospital. You don't want people to not be able to get the things they need to live. So complicated. But if we can shut down a lot of the financial activity of the people that fund these campaigns, then we can get things that are better for the working class. And I think when we can focus more on policies that are good for the average person, get an economic climate that works better, then we can actually come together and agree on certain things. Because, I know a lot of people that will fight a whole lot when it comes to like names and identifications and stuff like that. But if you look at different policies that have been enacted that have hurt our economic situation, like, for example, like the bottom 50% of people just have like a very small portion of the wealth in this entire country. Like the top 1%, the percentage of money that they have and that they don't put back into the economy because they have so much they can't spend it, so they hoard it, often in offshore accounts, is just absurd. And if you look at the drain on the amount of money that the middle class and like our country as a whole has over time, since like the 60s, 70s, 80s, that it just started to have this period of inflation, but not having much growth. And then we have money that's siphoned away to the upper class and not reinvested, that's instead hoarded away somewhere. Most people would have, and I mean, the most impoverished people would have an extra grand or two every single month, just like off the bat. So when people say that, wealthy people having money doesn't hurt other people, it's actually not completely accurate, because once you get to a certain amount of wealth, when you're no longer reinvesting it, when you're no longer doing things with it that put it back into our economy, you just like pull it out. And then that money, it's like Monopoly. Once somebody gets all the money, there's not anything that other people can do, and the game just starts to suck. Representatives and senators should be paid zero. I don't hate that idea. I think it'd probably be better to just not have a crazy high salary. I think if it was a reasonable, comfortable salary, I'd be okay with like $100,000 a year. Then I think that would be something that people would be comfortable with. So there would be an incentive to do it, but it wouldn't be so much that it was like, also they can't trade stocks. Allowing senators to trade stocks, I mean, there are people that follow Nancy Pelosi's trades and just make bank just because they do whatever she does, because she finds out what's going on and then she invests in those stocks and makes stupid money. But then, of course, if you vote for something, that might not seem like that big a deal. It's easy enough to justify because you're like, I can make a couple mil off of this. And I mean, it's really not that bad. Like, all I got to do is this one tiny little vote. It influences people in a really bad way. So even more important than their salary is the fact that they're allowed to trade stocks. That is just wild. Anywhere else, it would be insider trading, but it's okay for, our fun little representatives because they make the laws. Term limits and House of Rep and Senate terms. That's a really fair point. I think that we should also have term limits for judges, but that would be hard because in the Constitution, it says that judges should serve as long as they have good behavior, which has been interpreted as for life. So that might involve like a change to the Constitution, which is complicated. But the Constitution has been changed before. And term limits for judges, I do not think would be a bad thing, because you do get corruption. I mean, look at how we're seeing with the Supreme Court. They're taking all this money from people that have had, different cases come before the Supreme Court. Try living in Portland. I don't know what you mean by that. Online verified loading would be an enhancement to the process. You mean like online voting? Oh, yeah. I would definitely be interested in that. The one thing that concerns me about that is I do really like how we have like a paper ballot and it's scanned in, so people can go back and look at the paper ballots. I know not every single election is done that way. I think it would be smart to do to have federal election laws instead of individual states where there's different ways of doing things. I would be down with some federal rules. But I do like the idea of having those like paper proof that we can go back and do a recount and be like, okay, we can know that there was no sort of electronic tampering. Because, I mean, we all know that hacking exists in the world. And even though, we literally, part of why, Trump's in trouble with the RICO stuff is Sidney Powell, remember her, the Kraken? She directed people to like get into an election office and like they went through the Dominion voting machines to try and find proof of it. So even though with that particular thing, that was never proven, because and another one that they claimed had votes changed wasn't even connected to the internet. So like, you know, if you don't have the internet, obviously that can't happen. Or like some sort of, you know, wireless connection with other devices, then you're not going to have that happen. But I do like the idea of some sort of paper backup so that we can go back and check. I think that recounts and checking to make sure that things are legitimate is a legitimate thing to do. So on the one hand, I like the idea of being able to do something through the internet, and then maybe you could have like some other type of verification, but it really would depend on how it's implemented, and I'm open to the idea. But I would rather maybe like registration could be done through the internet with, you know, there's all sorts of verification that can be done. And then, you know, maybe you have to go to or mail in your vote for the actual thing so that there's a paper trail.
You can register online.
What?
You can register online.
Dude, sweet. I'm going to start doing that every time. Apparently you can register online. Why have I had to show up? That's super annoying. So I guess I'm okay with what we're already doing. All right, let's see what we got. They stole a bunch of laptops, said they disappeared. If you can give me a place to go, I will actually go and look over it. And in fact, go ahead and give me somewhere to go. I will go and check on that. And I'm going to go ahead and go out here. Let me see if there's anything major I haven't said, because so yeah, overall, the main thing is that the RICO case is different because it's a state case, not a federal one. So the pardoning thing is out of the picture. RICO stuff takes a really long time, so this could drag on quite a lot. They can make the free speech claims for the Georgia case, but they cannot make them for the DC case. It is possible that parts will be removed from Georgia, but there was a lot of activity in Georgia with a paper trail that is likely to bite him in the booty. And then racketeering is primarily used because they want to be able to come after somebody who's directing other people to do things that are illegal. And so that's why that sort of thing is used. And so the overall thing is that they're saying that they were trying to change the results of the election was the ultimate goal, and that they were trying to get other people to either go against their oath of office by appointing electors that the people had not voted for, or the documents that were turned in were, you know, they had some fraudulent documents that were turned in. And then they had actually some people show up at Ruby Freeman's and Shay Moss's like residence and actually try to harass her into claiming that she was committing election fraud when she wasn't. So there's like witness intimidation that's involved in some of the counts as well. Including letting Raffensperger basically saying like, this could be a problem for you and your lawyer, like you're going to be in more trouble than the people who committed the fraud. But there are certain aspects of that you can make a free speech argument about. So that's all just going to depend on how well they make that argument. So that's just kind of the overall thing. So if there's any other questions about that, I will do that. And then I will go and try and figure out what you're talking about with stolen laptops. Democrats say elections are illegitimate all the time. Yeah, in certain ways, sure. In fact, when we had the whole like Bush and Gore election, that actually was an election where they went back and they established that it would have gone, you know, for Gore had they not decided to call the election early, and had they properly counted, you know, the ballots. Was it in Florida? This was a long time ago. He had Bush's like brother or some like affiliate was a governor. Anyways, in that scenario, when they went back, that would have swayed the election. So in certain areas, it is a fair thing to say. Also, with, you know, you can make arguments when it comes to a difference between the popular vote and the electoral college. That's a whole nother video. But there's a difference between making the argument and then trying to get people to vote against, or have like actual documents where you're saying that you're an elector when you're not, or, actually trying to carry out these steps to change it. So that's the big difference. It's like, and even with the DC court, they did a really good job by saying you can lie all you want. You can say whatever you want, that's fine. But as soon as you actually took these actions, as soon as you filled out these documents, as soon as you did, fraudulent activity, that's when you get in legal trouble. So it is possible to say that you don't feel like an election was legitimate for many different reasons, and you're not going to go to jail. Aw, what is this heart I just saw? It was cute. Explain to me what that was. What was that? Someone like drew a heart on here. I don't know what that means. Oh, okay. Ah, I see. You know what? You just sent two of them. All right, Larry. If you want to go live for a second, I will. Because you literally just sent two of them, and that was very sweet. Oh, have to go to bed. Please share. Oh, that's great. All right, awesome. Well, have a lovely night, Larry. I appreciate it. I really do. That's awesome. And I really love that I have people talking to me who have different perspectives on things, because it keeps me honest. It keeps me on my toes. And it also makes sure that I don't have tunnel vision, because anybody can. And I really do sincerely appreciate that I'm not setting up a space that is has too much groupthink, because that's really not my goal. All right, so I'm gonna go to bed too, because it is late. You hate Trump supporters, I bet. No, not at all, actually. I feel like I actually feel bad, because I feel like that Trump came in with a lot of promises that I understand why they were things that people liked. There's also things about him that I very much did not like. But I actually have a really good friend of mine. We were talking about politics the other day, and he was, I do tend more towards the left, which is obvious. But he was basically like, oh, well, I voted for Trump originally. Oh, you're going to think badly of me. And I was like, no, in all honesty, I think better of you, because you not only, had a perspective, but you challenged and updated that perspective as time went on. And that's hard. And I also don't think that your worth is defined by your beliefs. My goal is to try and, and discuss the beliefs, and to try and admit when I'm wrong, so that it won't feel as scary to be proven wrong on anything, or to feel like if you were wrong on something that your identity is called into question at all, because amazing, intelligent, smart people fall for things that are not correct every single day. And as I have many, many times. So if I can free people from feeling like their identity is being attacked when their beliefs are being challenged, I feel like our entire country will be better off. So there we go. And I'm not here to try and tell you that you're bad for having different perspectives. I'm just going to give you the best information I've been able to pull together. All right. Have a good night, y'all. Thanks for interacting with me. And I will put something up soon.